When I think of the style and the look of Orphan Black, one of the first things I said to Aaron when we were first designing the look of the show was that I wanted it pretty. I wanted it stylized, but I didn't want it so stylized that it didn't feel like the real world.
For me, it's all those small details that add up to the subconscious experience that the viewer has, even if they don't notice, it gets in there somehow.
And we don't want it to look like every other television show out there. We want to give it its own unique look and feel. And so that's been what we've been trying to do as a team.
In terms of scenes that I think are really cool and visually striking, the black room scene with Ethan Duncan and Rachel, the very last scene, that's my favorite scene in the second season. That was visually insane. It's crazy in 5 different ways. Shooting in like that shiny black room is near impossible. Like every time you take a step in it, they have to shine out the footprints so that you don't get the glare of the footprints in the camera. Like visually daunting to try to do that.
Anything in the garage always looks incredible. Aaron knows how to take a space that is enclosed like that and make it whatever he wants. So anytime that we're in the garage and the garage doors are down, the light that's coming through the windows of the garage is just stunning. And you see all the dust from the garage and you get these beams of light crossing the camera and it's just incredible. And then you get to burying a body in the garage and you're kicking up all the dirt and he's just able to capture so much ambiance from that using just the light and the dust and the smoke and work in that environment.
I think the introduction of Helena was really striking, sort of this angelic, demonic thing. We shot that at pitch black at night, and you wouldn't know that because on her coverage, it's daylight.
There's one really sweeping scene that I remember only because I was in it. It's season 1 where we find the body in the quarry. And we sort of come up over the crest of that hill and we just see this giant, landscape right there and me standing on the edge of this precipice. And once again, in the moment, you don't quite realize what it is or what it's gonna look like. And then the result is spectacular, and once again, you're standing on the edge of a cliff, basically. And you go, I hope this is gonna work. And when it really does, it's all that much more rewarding, so.
I met Aaron Morton back when I was doing episodes of Xena in New Zealand.
I worked on every single episode of Xena, 132 shows.
Aaron was the A-camera focus puller. And we just kind of hit it off.
John would come down and direct. He did quite a few of them.
And then I kind of lost track of him for a while. I mean, there was a good 10 years that elapsed between doing Xena and then going back and doing Spartacus. And when I went back to do Spartacus, he was the cinematographer of Spartacus, and it established this beautiful look.
I was actually a huge fan of Aaron before I even knew that he was on the show, because I'm a huge Spartacus fan. So at the last cast party, I kind of cornered him and maybe talked to him for 45 minutes about everything Spartacus.
And I really wanted to do the show with him, and I felt like he was just a good collaborator, and that him and I would work really well.
They had some people lined up, and I'm not sure of the full story. I don't think whoever was going to shoot it ended up not being able to shoot it.
That cinematographer quit on me 3 weeks before we had to start production.
Hey Aaron, how are you? You want a job for 6 months? And sure. So, it was a quick conversation with my family and then got on the plane.
I think that when he showed up, so we were really under the gun. So there wasn't like we had like a ton of time to go into long discussions about what it was going to look like anyway. But I just trusted him. And
we just sort of found it as I went. I mean, no one, even John, hasn't been, it has to be this, it has to be that. We sort of would have broad brushstrokes conversations, and then he just trusted me to sort of carry it.
That shorthand that John and Aaron have is part of what I'm talking about.
They actually talk to each other very little when we're shooting. It's more like
You trust people when you see that kind of stuff happening, because you just know that this is like the back of their hands to them.
Color is something that I wanted to explore in Orphan Black, because I knew that would be a point of difference for a lot of television, because I wanted it to be colourful without, but not for the sake of it. There's a purpose to the colour shifts and the subtle colour things that we do, and I knew that that would, by its nature, give it its own feel and look.
Yeah, he uses like reds and blues and turquoise in a really kind of exaggerated way.
Aaron really likes the kind of the green out of the fluorescent tubes, and in fact there's a little bit of green in our sunlight a lot of the time, and certainly in our moonlight.
One of the directors was joking that it should be called Orphan Green, the show, but I don't think I go that heavy with the green.
Early on when we were designing the series, it was always really important for us that each clone, each girl, each character had their own world, and each world had its own look and feel, and was very different and separate from each other.
Sarah's world is so different than Allison's, than Casima's, than Helena's, than Rachel's.
There is subtlety to the characters, and I try and give each character a bit of a subtle difference.
Sarah's world tends to be, you know, Felix's loft and the streets, and there is a kind of more of a grit and a fluorescent look, and sometimes a neon element, and so it tends to be a little edgier and more contrasty.
Helena will, whenever I can, have a hot backlight to exaggerate the shock of blonde hair and that sort of thing.
We've been using a lot of weird lensing with her.
Casima and Allison have a bit more of a purple sort of twist.
Her basement is kind of yellow and her craft room is blue, and there's a lot more color to Allison's world.
It just feels clean, and it feels pretty, and it feels colorful and bright, whereas Sarah's feels really moody and darker, and there's more of a smoky effect to it.
Casima mostly has been in the lab lately, so there is a kind of a little bit of an antiseptic sort of feel, although we like to add sunlight. Like, we like to use a lot of like heavy sunlight through her windows in the lab. You know, in her apartment from season 1, there was more sepia, there was more browns and yellows.
Well, for Rachel, in terms of the light and colour, it's generally a little more monochrome, less overt colour in her environments, because she's often in the stark dyad laboratory or office situation. So just try and have her with a little less colour overall.
It's very cool how he kind of lights based on character, and I think that really helps us in terms of selling these women as very different.
And these aren't blanket rules, because, you know, their environment sort of ends up dictating, you know, how I light something. But wherever we can, we do play with reflections just to reinforce the idea of there being many genetic identicals, twins, triplets, etc. So it's not something that we push too hard, because you can beat people around the face with it a little bit too much. But if there's an opportunity there, then we'll try and take it.
With a show like this, I think you have to you want people to believe in the reality of the characters and the situations, especially with an absurd premise like clones. And I think that we try to kind of help that along with the cinematography and the look of the show.
What I'm proud of is that we've been very consistent, I think, across the seasons, the 3 years. With the look, we've really, you know, stuck to our guns in terms of the overall feel of the show, which is important, I think, because in the story, the first 3 seasons happen in about 2 months or something. Certainly in this modern way of watching content, you know, you often binge watch 2 or 3 seasons, and, you know, back to back sometimes. So it's nice that it feels like one long movie, you know.